Welcome, my fellow humans, to ASMuRder, the only true crime podcast with an ASMR twist. I am your host, The Gru, and today's episode is number 14. Oh, how far we have come, fellow humans? We have wandered together the expanses of true crime tales, both short and long, strange and mundane, and most of all, unsolved. And this time around is no different, as we will be discussing a case whose subject, a young girl, became the basis for a well-known national alert for missing children. But in order to do that, we have to start with the child that ended up being the reason behind this alert. So, without further ado, let's talk about Amber Renee Hagerman, a young Texan girl that went missing while riding her bicycle on her own. Content warning. Today's episode contains graphic content not suitable for some audiences, which include mentions about a child's death and sexual abuse and the state of a dead body. Listener discretion is therefore advised. Amber was a young girl when she disappeared in Arlington, Texas. She was just 9 years old when she went missing on January 12, 1996. That fateful day, the girl had been visiting her grandparents alongside her younger brother Ricky and their mother Donna Whitson. The children asked if they could go outside and ride their bicycles. As it was usual coming from them, the adults didn't worry too much. It was a calm Saturday afternoon. Nothing could go wrong in such a nice neighborhood. But we are here, and we are now, aren't we? And we know better, don't we? No matter how much you trust the place you live in, it's not the best of ideas to leave children unsupervised on their own. And this family learned that lesson in the worst way possible. Amber had been riding the pink bike that Santa had given her around 3:10 p.m. near her grandmother's home, who had told her and her brother Ricky to not go too far away, and so they stayed close. They didn't go further than a fifth of a mile from her house, following the grandmother's word and warning. The girl pedaled into the parking lot of a Winn-Dixie grocery store, which was 2 blocks from the house. So Ricky returned with the family because he felt like this would be disobeying, while Amber decided to continue riding her bicycle on her own. He never suspected that this would be the last time he saw his sister. After a while, Ricky went to fetch Amber by his family's request, but all the boy could find was the pink bicycle lying on the ground and nothing else. It only took 8 minutes for everything to go downhill, for a crime to happen with almost no evidence and barely any person to witness what had occurred. A black 80s or 90s truck was the car in which she was taken, then drove away towards the city center, and only one person was witness to what had happened that day. Jim Kevill, a retired man, quickly called 911. He said that the culprit was a young and probably white or Hispanic man with dark hair, and described him to the authorities as well as he could, who began investigating the case as soon as they could. Kevill said that he heard her scream and decided to call the police and inform them about what had happened. He told them that the stranger parked nearby the place where Amber was playing, ran towards her, and then grabbed her without wasting any time. Police soon flooded Arlington and only took breaks to sleep and eat. They asked people from all over the city about the whereabouts of the child, but they didn't find much use. There was a laundromat near the Winn-Dixie, so authorities suspect that there had been more witnesses, but they were too afraid to speak up in case they were unfairly deported or arrested. Even with police reassuring people that they just wanted information regarding the crime, no matter how big or small it might seem, no one stepped forward for over 20 years. As soon as Amber's father, Richard, heard about what had happened, he called a man whose daughter had also been kidnapped and then murdered in Petaluma, California 3 years prior. Amber's mother called the FBI and the news media in hopes of getting help and getting her daughter back. Her family and many volunteers began looking for the little girl without wasting more time, with a search that lasted for a couple of days. Amber's grandfather, Jimmy Whitson, was the person who led this search, as it wasn't the first time a girl from his family had been kidnapped, having started the investigation as soon as Kevill had reported the crime to the police. Sadly, they couldn't find anything, even with the many missing persons flyers and posters and news reports that were widely spread around. And of course, dear fellow human, comes the part we know is coming but don't want to hear. Her body was found 4 days after her disappearance, and the one who found her wasn't even involved in the search. Amber was found by a man walking his dog around midnight, laying in a little creek. He called the police, and about an hour and a half later, they informed the girl's parents about her death. They refused to believe that it was their daughter, and honestly, who could blame them? Their sweet daughter had been found dead, killing any and all hopes of seeing her alive and well once again. They remained inside of their house after being notified of the findings, grieving about their child at about 2 a.m., right when they heard the awful news. The body was probably left in the creek late in the night because authorities confirmed that workers had been there earlier in the day and there was nothing there. There had been a fierce storm, and police believed that Amber's body had been moved by the rising and altered waters of the creek shortly before she was found. Amber was naked except for a single sock. Her body was hidden behind an apartment complex, and there were many laceration wounds on her neck. She was found less than 5 miles away from where she had been taken, very close to her home. An autopsy revealed that Amber had been alive for 2 days before she was found. Her throat had been slit, possibly by either a knife or a screwdriver, and there was a lot of blood and bruises all over her body. The Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office ruled that Amber's death had been a homicide and that the cause of death was, quote, cut wounds to the throat, end quote. Even though a reward of $75,000 was offered for any information regarding the murder, no one came forward with any information. The police searched for the culprit, but to no avail. Police suspected that the culprit might have been a local person because the area in which her body was found was very secluded, hidden to an outsider's eye. Authorities wondered if the murderer had a connection to the place, strong enough to direct themselves toward the city center after committing the crime. The easiest thing to do for a person not from the city would have been going to a nearby highway, Highway 360, and nobody would have been able to follow the culprit and the victim or even realize where they had gone. Authorities theorized that something had triggered the criminal to kidnap Amber and that it wasn't planned at all. Over $1 million was spent on this case, and it led nowhere for a long, long time. Plus, the group that was in charge of investigating the case was disbanded in June 1997. Shortly after Amber was found, a woman called Diane Simone came up with an idea to prevent further crimes like these from happening as much as possible. She had seen the news report on TV in which a video of Amber riding her new bicycle was shown to the general public, and it affected her deeply because she was a mother too. Simone couldn't stop thinking about the case, as it could have also happened to her own kids without any kind of warning, and called a local radio to discuss her proposal of creating an alert system for missing kids. Her plan was that when a 911 call was made, radio stations would pause their programming and allow the alert to be heard. Amber's case is the reason behind the Amber Alert system in the USA, which basically is a child abduction emergency alert. Unlike one might think, the name is actually an acronym that stands for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response. It has saved hundreds of children from sharing the same fate as the little girl, so one good thing came out of all this. The first test of the Amber Alert was done in Arlington, months after the girl was killed. Simone was the reason behind this. She sent a letter to the radio station she had spoken with, requesting that if the system ended up being used, it should be called Amber's name. While all of this was being prepared, Amber's mother started to ask for stricter laws for cases such as her daughter's. In June 1996, she testified in Congress asking legislators to create a national registry for sexual delinquents to make things easier for authorities to investigate. Martin Frost, the congressman that represented the Whitson district, created a law called Amber Hagerman that included what Donna had asked for. Amber's parents were present when Bill Clinton passed this law. Seeing that the law had actually passed, Richard Hagerman started to collect signatures to prove to the then Governor George W. Bush that people wanted stricter laws against sexual offenders. Later, in 2000, the United States House of Representatives tried to inspire national communities to put this alert into countrywide use. In April 2003, George W. Bush, now as president, signed the Amber Alert as a legislation making it a national thing. People always had alerts for things such as weather, so creating an alert to find missing children wasn't a far-fetched idea. In fact, it's been very useful in the years it has been used. This system is used in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, the District of Columbia, and 33 other countries around the world. Simone says that everything is possible because there's people who care about children's well-being, and that only with their collaboration did the Amber Alert show positive outcomes. There's been a more recent and voluntary investigation, started on April 20th, 2009, by a group of university students that also looked into other cold cases for the span of a year. On the 25th anniversary of Amber's kidnapping, January 13th of last year, Arlington police once again asked for people's collaboration to find out who murdered the little girl. Oak Farms Dairy offered a reward of $10,000 for any kind of clue that could put the culprit behind bars, perhaps deep in the ground, under a chicken coop. Sorry, where was I? Oh, right. Authorities want to solve this case to maybe bring a sense of peace to this family, a well-needed closure that they have needed for a long time. A month after her daughter was found, Donna decided to pay a visit to Amber's school because a new playground was being made to honor the little girl, and she wanted to console Amber's confused classmates. She saw that her desk had been decorated with pink hearts and ribbons, and there was a large framed photograph of Amber surrounded by these decorations. Amber's mother was shocked, the wound still fresh, and so the kids tried to soothe her pain by saying good things about Amber and shyly asking random questions about their dead classmate. One of the children wondered when Amber had left the house, and Donna replied as softly as she could that it had been at 3:10 and that everything had happened in only 8 minutes. She tried to make them understand that it was important to not wander too far from home. Donna's grief and healing was captured on a film documentary called After Amber, made by WFAA-TV. It's a very emotional documentary. It's what the cool kids call a tearjerker. Bring tissues. To this day, Donna says the fact that the alert is named after her daughter is bittersweet, and she keeps wondering what would have happened if the Amber Alert had existed back in 1996. She might have been saved by this alert just like over 1,000 kids have been saved so far today. She would have been 35 years old, and her mother can't just forget the fact that her eldest daughter will never come home again, no matter how many years pass. Authorities have not given up the case. In fact, they are still looking for clues. Even though the case is sometimes referred to as being cold, the Arlington Police Department doesn't consider it as so. They get new leads multiple times a year. They're convinced that there's a person out there that's withholding information, so they don't want to give up in hopes of finding the culprit once and for all and bringing some closure to Amber's family. Actually, there has been new information found as recently as 2021. Authorities said that they had finally found some DNA evidence that might belong to Amber's murderer, but it's still being investigated. Authorities refuse to say what kind of physical evidence they have against the possible culprit, saying that only the criminal would be aware of what it was. Amber's mother talked in public once again soon after this announcement, pleading to the murderer to turn themselves in and to give her daughter the long-awaited justice that everyone has been seeking without rest. I wonder, will this case finally close after more than 2 decades and over 7,000 leads? There's hope once again, and the day in which the murderer is found is hopefully around the corner. Well, alas, fellow humans, we have come to the end of yet another episode. As usual, I just want to say that it was a privilege and a pleasure to spend time with you today. My day is made brighter because of it. That was episode 14 of ASMuRder. If you want to catch up on any episodes you may have missed, or you just want to hear more of me in general, you can go to my website, murderpod.net. That's murderpod.net. You can also find my podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. If you can leave me a good review, maybe throw some stars my way, I would be mightily grateful. Also, I wanted to apologize for the lateness of this episode. Life finds a way, to quote your Goldberg. Anyway, if you enjoyed what you hear, leave your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Also, I'll leave links in the description. Until next time, please be kind to yourselves and be good to each other. Take care.